So my name is Kohei, and I am also a qualified naturopath and medical herbalist. And I've been in clinic for about 3 years and a bit now. And throughout that experience, I've seen a lot of patients with a lot of different conditions. But one of the things that I like to specialize in, or I have a specific passion for, is the skin. And so this talk I got really excited about because it's something that I've experienced myself, and I'll talk a little bit about that. It is something that I am very passionate about because about 7 years ago I was head to toe covered in eczema. It got to a point where I was bedridden for about 4 or 5 months. I had to quit my job. I really couldn't do anything. I was weeping from every single part of my body. The only parts that I didn't have eczema was the palm of my hands and the sole of my feet. I couldn't sleep. Every night I would get to sleep around 4 a.m. because up till that time I'll be scratching. And then I'll wake up to the sound of the birds around 7 a.m. So practically I was getting about 3 hours of sleep every night. And I just stayed at home. I had the luxury of doing that, which was sort of nice. But at the same time, I got really, really depressed at that point. It wasn't a nice period of time for me, but it is something that for me was significant because after seeing doctors, after seeing GPs, after seeing dermatologists, they can only tell me that eczema is not curable and there's nothing we can really do. Here's some steroid creams and steroid pills and some antibiotics if you need it. That was a huge letdown for me, that somebody had just told me that, right, you're stuck with this for the rest of your life. And you know, it was affecting my life significantly. And so I didn't know what to do. And then my brother was a business partner with a naturopath, so he said, why don't you go and see him? And at this point I would try anything to fix this. And I went and saw him, and he was the first person to spend 90 minutes of his time explaining exactly what was happening inside my body and how he could fix it. Now, before I started getting better, I was already sold. It made sense in my head. And as I go through the talk tonight, I'll sort of relate back to my story every now and then as to how I developed my eczema and how I helped to get to this point where I'm 99% eczema free and it's no longer affecting my the quality of my life. So you can see that this is something that I do get really passionate about when I see my patients, if they have eczema or even other types of skin conditions. I get a lot of kids coming in with skin issues, and it's just one of the greatest feelings to be able to give the parents some relief because their kid's not sleeping well at night time. They might be scratching themselves all the time and then bleeding. It's not a nice feeling for the parent, but of course for the kid as well. It's so nice to see a child with nice clean skin and then they're not bothered by the itching so much. So anyway, enough about me. I'll move on to the next part. So what's eczema? When I ask that question, you guys might be sitting there scratching your heads thinking, is that a trick question? It really isn't, and I actually genuinely want to ask you guys what you guys think what eczema is. So anybody want to take a stab at it?
Dry cracking skin.
Dry cracking skin.
Itchy as buggery.
Itchy, yeah, very itchy. Anything else?
Immune system malfunction.
Immune system malfunction, great. Anything else? Yeah, you guys are on the money.
Maybe sensitivity to chemicals or allergens.
Absolutely, yeah.
Stress.
Stress, great. You guys are nailing some of the things that I'm going to talk about tonight. So, defining eczema is a little bit tricky. It's because it's a term that's used to define a group of medical conditions that cause the skin to become inflamed and irritated. Yeah. So all the things that you guys just said are all correct. Yeah. But, and this is the definition provided by WebMD. Thank you very much. Nice and precise and clear as mud now, isn't it? But the thing is it is hard to define because there's a lot of different causes and a lot of different presentations. What we know about eczema at this point is that for Kiwi kids, it affects about 20% of them. And that is a pretty large portion, but I think it's underestimated. This is the number of kids that are admitted to doctors or they go through the medical system. A lot of people are starting to see alternative practitioners, which means that it's not going to be recorded in their system. So that means that there's probably a much higher prevalence of eczema altogether. Yeah. It tends to be a little bit lower in adults. Some kids might grow out of it, some kids don't. But we also know that usually it has a family history of eczema, asthma, or hay fever, right? So it's that allergy line that your family has carried down. It certainly is itchy. In terms of the presentation of the eczema, it can be inflamed, it can be dry, scaly, or weepy. It really depends on the type of eczema that you get. Yeah. I'll just go through some of those types of eczema that you can get. So contact dermatitis, so that could be irritants like you mentioned before, specifically to certain substances, right? And that is actually caused by the physical contact of your skin with those irritants. So you can see this person has some type of metal pendant, and when he touches that, he gets a specific outline of inflammation. So that is a very clear contact dermatitis. And common metals that can cause this is things like copper, nickel, yeah, or even chromium, those types of metals. Sometimes belt buckles are made out of copper or nickel. Can't remember which one, but that can sometimes cause irritation around this area. Yeah. It can also be things like cosmetics. It can be things like shampoos. It can be makeup that you might put on. It could be perfumes or aftershaves. Yeah. Anything that contains potential irritants in there. I don't see this very often in my clinic. Not specific ones like this anyway. Sometimes it can be very broad. I've had people who had some reactions to water, specifically tap water. So we've managed to put filters on shower heads to help with that. Other things that might be more common would be things like seborrheic eczema, or what's called cradle cap for infants. And that is usually caused by either fungal issues or certain hormones that are passed down from the mother to the baby, which causes too much production of or overactivity of your sebaceous glands, which usually relates back to things like acne. If you have overactive sebaceous glands producing sebum, that creates acne. But for babies, it comes out a little bit like this. I would say in my clinical experience, it tends to be more more prevalent with fungal infections, or fungal overgrowth, is what I like to call it, because quite often things like candida, you guys heard of candida? Yeah. So that is something that every single one of us have in our gut, but it's just when it overgrows, it becomes a problem. So the fungal infection may come through because of things like antibiotics use by the mother while she's pregnant, yeah, because that basically kills everything in your gut. Everything from the good bacteria to the bad bacteria. And often afterwards, if you don't replenish your gut with proper probiotics for at least a month, your bad bacteria tends to overgrow, and it becomes much harder for the probiotics to thrive, which means that it can enhance the living situation for things like candida, a much more acidic environment. It can also happen if the baby needs antibiotics early on, potentially because of an infection or potential threat to an infection. And also cesarean birth, C-section. Do you guys know about the whole mechanism of vaginal birth versus C-section? Basically, when the baby is born through the vaginal canal, you're exposed to a lot of the probiotics that your mother has. Now that goes into the baby's gut as well as on your skin. If that exposure doesn't happen, i.e. Having a C-section done, your baby is more likely to have deficiencies in those probiotics, which means that they can have gut dysfunction later on, and also problems with bacterial balance on your skin, because your skin is made up of a lot of different bacteria. Some of them are beneficial bacteria, and some of them are not. But it's all about balance. And if those beneficial bacteria is lacking, you're more likely to have eczema. Dyshidrotic eczema. Any of you guys seen this before? Yep. So this is something that I'm seeing more and more these days, and I don't know why. It is actually something that I have a little bit as well, and I thought I'll give you a little demonstration today. That's the kind of, it's not a very good example, but it usually pops up first around this finger and this finger first, and it goes around into other parts of the your hand. It comes out in a lot of blisters like this, which is very fun to pop, but that makes it even worse, so try not to do that. The things that could cause that, and it can be a range of things. Stress is a big one. Dust mites, allergies, and fungal issues as well. Now that's one thing for me. What causes this, and what has caused this actually, I don't usually get this, but I had a bit of ice cream. And ice cream is full of dairy and sugar, amongst other things, but those two are the main ones for me. Now the reason and how that connects to fungal infections is that sugar is something that feeds fungus. So when you're doing things like candida diet, you need to cut out sugar, and yeast as well. And dairy for me is something that I'm intolerant to. Now I'm not lactose intolerant. This is a bit another one that's a little bit tricky because intolerance is not black and white. It's a spectrum. So there's a degree of how intolerant you are to certain things. Now for me, when I have dairy, it doesn't really affect my gut too much. It's not like it causes bloating or gassiness or diarrhea, but what it can cause is a bit of skin issue. So the combination of those two, affecting the candida, really brought this about. So basically I'm on no dairy and no sugar diet for the next month. And it usually clears up completely fine. And I really emphasize this because when you come to these talks or when you come and see a practitioner, you get to learn a lot about yourself. That is really important. Individually, what do you need? And I'll talk about this a little bit later too. But that empowers you, and then you know what you need to do afterwards. So usually when patients come and see me, I don't expect them to come and see me for the rest of their lives. Well, maybe, but not all the time, right? I eventually want to graduate them out of the clinic so that they don't have to come back because they know enough up here, and I've taught them enough about how their body works and what they should do to look after it, so that they can go away and just look after themselves. That's how the medical system should work, and that's how it used to work in China a long time ago. Doctors used to get paid for not seeing as many people. It's the complete opposite system. Now they're becoming a little bit more westernized, so the more people that they see, the more they get paid. Which is a little unfortunate, but that's the type of treatment that we as naturopaths try to provide, is more long-lasting, yeah, teaching, not just giving you the fish, but teaching you how to fish. Right. And discoid eczema, this is something also that I don't see that often in my clinic. And this is usually after things like insect bites or abrasions or some type of infections around that area. What does this look like to you guys? There's another condition that can give rise to this kind of skin issue. Ringworm, yeah. Ringworm creates this type of ring effect with the sort of a clearer inside. And it can be very hard to distinguish. The thing about discoid eczema, or it's also known as nummular eczema, is it usually starts off with tiny little dots first, yeah, and then it turns into a circular discoid eczema, right? And it also usually don't have this part in the middle where it's a bit clearer. It's usually like this, where it's quite red all together. But when it starts healing, usually it starts healing from the inside. So that's why you get this clearer patch, and now it looks more like ringworm. Yeah? But that's how you can tell the difference. It's how it sort of starts off. Whereas ringworm, which looks like this, starts off exactly like this, and usually has a bumpy sort of ring around that area, and the middle part is more smooth, but it's dry and scaly. Yeah? Sometimes it has another ring inside and another ring inside. That's how you can tell differences between ringworm and discoid eczema. And there's also what's called stasis eczema, or dermatitis, and that's usually, it is to do with the pooling of the blood at the lower limbs. Again, this is also something that I don't really see in my clinic, or it might be something on the side, because usually when you have this, there's bigger fish to fry. Things like diabetes, yeah, where you get a lot of lack of circulation around the legs, and that means that the blood pools at that area, and it triggers what's called an innate immune response, and that can turn into inflammation, itchiness, and ultimately dermatitis. Right, let's talk a little bit about causes of eczema. Now, we talked a little bit about the chemical irritants. Yeah, so those can be washing powders, detergents, personal care products, cosmetics, clothes. Yeah, polyester, wool can be quite irritating for a lot of people, and environmentals. Now, that's something that's also very important. Things like pollens, which we have a lot of in New Zealand, by the way, and molds as well, dust mites. Now, personal story. Mid last year to end of last year, I was living in Campbell's Bay with some flatmates, and my eczema was just getting worse and worse and worse. And I couldn't quite figure out why. It's not that I had changed much of my diet, but it wasn't great, so I thought, okay, I'll fix that. So I started eating better, but still getting worse. I started to try and reduce my stress, but that still didn't quite work. And then I realized that a lot of other people in the flat was also getting sick. One person who was also a chiropractor is a close friend of mine as well, and ever since he's been living there, he couldn't sleep. He'd have an eye mask on, he'd have the earplugs on, but in the middle of the night, if we accidentally slammed the door or one of the kitchen drawers a bit loudly, he'd know about it. Yeah, and he hadn't been like this before. And I figured out for me, it was the molds. Yeah, the molds release spores, and they affect my susceptibility to things like candida. You know, so as soon as I moved out, skin cleared. Yeah, didn't really have to do much. That chiropractor also, when he moved out, that first night that he moved out, he slept like a baby. Didn't need anything.
So do you see the mold?
We did see some. It wasn't a lot around the walls, but there was certainly some in the bathroom. But we suspected that there was quite a bit in the carpet. Hard to tell. You can't really see those things. So what I usually ask my patients to do is to ring up one of the companies I sort of associate with. They can come in and do assessments, because if it's
so you
a bit
don't
hard to
always
tell.
see it, it can be there and not
No,
visible.
it's very hard because sometimes you might have a leaky home, and the molds might be inside your walls, and sometimes you don't see it. Yeah. So it's always good to get somebody to come in and test it so that they can analyze it properly and give you an idea of how much it's affecting that person and what they can do to clean it up. Yeah. Right. Gut and liver function. So these images here, this is something that I specialize in. So in my consultation, I do what's called live blood screening. So I take a small sample of blood from your finger, pop it up onto a microscope and onto a screen, and I take you through what's going on inside your body. This is something that my naturopath did for me when I was sick with the eczema, and I found it fascinating because it gives you a lot of information. Now, it's not a diagnostic tool, but it's a great screening tool to add some information to the consultation notes that I make. I put all of that information together to figure out what's going on inside your body. Now, some of the things that we're seeing here, we'll start with this one here. This is what we call a platelet aggregation. Now, platelets is something that's very important when you cut your finger. It's the one that stops you from bleeding to death, right? It clots your blood. When it comes together like this in your blood, it's a sign of inflammation. But you see these bubbles all along here. All of those makes this platelet what's called hypersecretory platelets. That, for me, is a sign of leaky gut. Yeah. Now, this happens because... Oh, you guys know what leaky gut is?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, good. Okay. Let me explain. Leaky gut is basically, it usually starts off as an imbalance of bacterial flora in your gut. So good bacteria, bad bacteria, the balance gets shifted, so there's more of the bad bacteria, and that starts to change the environment in the gut. And some of those negative bacteria starts to affect your mucus lining around your gut, and some of them can even poke microscopic holes into your intestinal lining. Yeah. That's why we call it leaky. Your gut usually has a very tight cell alignment, so that it's very selective. It just draws in nutrients and keeps away the toxins. You know? When it is leaky, some of those toxins float right through into the bloodstream. Yeah? And now it can start to affect you systemically because your blood goes through every single part of your body, basically. So when I see that, that is a sure sign that I need to do some gut work, yeah, and usually leads to this picture as well. This is a sample of dry blood. So this is a wet sample. This is a dry blood, and see these black lines coming through?
Mm-hmm.
These are some of the toxins that are floating around in the blood. Yeah. Now, every blood sample will have some degree of these black lines coming through, because your blood does need to carry some toxins, because it needs to go out of your body. So it needs to go into the liver first, goes out of your kidneys, into urine, and then out of your stool, etc. So it does need to carry some toxins. However, if there's a lot of it, which in this sample there is, that's when I say, okay, either the liver's not working very well to process those things out, and the kidneys, or there's a lot of things coming into the body that's not so good. So a lot of toxin exposure, whether it be something from work, yeah, whether it be things like alcohol, caffeine, cigarettes. Yeah. All those things can add up, but like I said, leaky gut can also lead to this as well because toxins are leaking into your bloodstream. Yeah. So these two signs basically tells me, right, gut work and blood cleanse. And this is what I had. So going back to how my condition came about, I had appendicitis when I was 14. Yeah. Afterwards, of course, they had to clean all of that up and use high doses of antibiotics. Yeah. That caused this to come through, which started to pile on the toxicity in my blood. You know? Now that starts putting some stress onto your liver. Now your liver's going, holy crap, there's way too much toxins for me to deal with. I'm going to hold on to it, or I'm going to recirculate it back into the bloodstream. Now that means that your first and second elimination channel, which is your gut and your kidneys, right? So urine and stool, is no longer working very well. You know? So what does it try to do? It chooses its third elimination channel, which is your skin. You know? You detox through your skin. That's where you sweat. You know? That's why when you go to saunas or you do Bikram yoga, it's part of detoxing because you're detoxing through your skin. In my case though, I was literally defecating from my skin. That's how bad it was, and that's why the skin was so bad, so systemically. It's not just around these areas, it was everywhere. So that's how my eczema started. Other people, it might be a little bit different. A few other pictures from the microscope. These are some immune cells, and this one in particular is called eosinophil. And if I see this in higher numbers in your blood, then I say, right, there's some type of allergy response. And most likely with people with eczema, I will see that in higher numbers. Now, I do have to be careful because sometimes eosinophils can be high with parasitic infections as well. So I need to tick off whether you have a parasitic infection or not as well. This is a bit of a sign of some candida spores coming through in the blood. You won't see the candida themselves in your blood. That would be a very, 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 very dangerous situation, and I would have to send you to the hospital. But some spores can sort of leak into the bloodstream if you have leaky gut. So these are some of the signs that I look out for if I suspect fungal overgrowth. Stress is definitely a big one. It causes up to about 90% of all the diseases in the world. And that's a huge, huge number, right? And we all kind of know it. It starts from up here and it affects the rest of the body, right? But have you guys actually asked why? Like, how does it work? You know, like everybody says stress causes this and that. Yeah, but how? You know? So I'm going to explain to you a little bit how this sort of works. So stress response is something that is very innate in our as humans. When you come across a tiger, right, which you don't really do these days, but back in a long time ago, if you come across a tiger, what happens? You go into what's called a fight or flight mode. Yeah, you either want to run away from it or fight it. And at that very moment, the way your body functions changes completely from what's called rest and digest mode. Yeah? What happens is a lot of the blood gets shunted away from your internal organs, yeah? Into your peripherals, so into your arms and legs, because that's where you need them, right? To run away from a tiger. And when that happens, it also goes to your brain, your eyes, and your heart as well. That's why your blood pressure goes up, your blood sugar levels goes up as well. All the things that you need to amp up your energy levels. Yeah? Now, at this point in time, if you had, say, I don't know, a cold, do you think the body is going to try and deal with that at the same time as running away from a tiger?
No.
No. No. And in fact, your body cannot be in a state of stress and relaxation at the same time. Yeah, it seems like common sense, but sometimes people forget about that. And so when that happens every now and then, yeah, you come across a tiger, that doesn't happen every day. When it happens every now and then, that's actually quite healthy for you. Yeah, it keeps you on the edge. But when it's happening every single day with your work, yeah, you might have a boss that's not particularly nice, or at work, or at school, you might be getting bullied. Yeah? You might have family problems. You might have other issues. Yeah, and a lot of us go through that these days. Much more chronic stress going through all the time, which means that your body is constantly in the fight or flight mode, and your body is very good at adapting to things, and that's why it becomes so much harder for you to get back into your rest and digest mode, right? Which means that your body is focusing on your stress response, right? Because if it dictates that is what is necessary at the moment, is to deal with the stress, and your body will always do that. Yeah? And it will neglect your immune function, it will neglect your digestive function, it'll neglect your hormonal balance, because it's all the things that you don't need when you're running away from a tiger. Yeah? So you can now start to see how this starts to affect your health, right? And all the gut issues and other things, the immune function, all of those things go haywire, and that's why stress causes a lot of different issues. And it can certainly come through in the skin. And I will make a side note that a lot of people who have a lot of confidence issues, especially kids, when they're holding on to things on the inside and they don't bring it out on the outside, I find that a lot of kids like that tend to have some type of skin issues, because your body's just screaming out to show that response coming through, and surely enough, comes out in the skin. Now,
so there's people who
internalize their stress, yeah, because that's where it's going. It's going straight here, yeah. So it starts affecting the gut, then it starts to affect the skin. Yeah. Now, genes. So we talked about, the family trait. Yeah, if your dad, your mom, your grandma has allergy issues, yes, you are more likely to have things like eczema, but is it more of the environment? Yeah, you grow up in the same environment as those people most of the time, and end up with some very similar foods that they eat as well, and the way they react to things like stresses. So environment becomes a big part of that. Your cells have receptors like these, and they receive signals from the outside environment. Yeah. It changes the formulation of the receptor so that it becomes a gate for the signals to come through, and then it talks with the nucleus. Yeah. Then it starts to think about, okay, what kind of proteins do I need to make from there to deal with this signal? Yeah. So you can imagine your cell is kind of like you as a body. You have eyes, ears, nose, mouth, skin, yeah, all the receptors that you need. Now, without any sort of environmental signals, what do you think will happen? Say if you're blind and you couldn't hear anything, you couldn't taste anything, you couldn't feel touch, what do you think happens to your brain? Nothing. You're getting no signals in. Yeah? It might continue with some of your internal organ functions, yeah? But you're getting no signals in. And it's exactly the way it works for your cells. Yeah? Your DNA is purely there to receive signals from the outside environment. So if you can change that environment, make that a much better environment for you, whether it be stresses, whether it be things that surround you like molds, yeah, dust mites, things like that. If you can change that environment, it can have a significant effect on how your genes are expressed. Yeah. So if you have a cancer gene, does that mean that you have cancer? No. Your environment will determine how likely it is for you to express that gene. Yeah. And the last little bit, itch. the itch itself, although it's not a cause of eczema, but it can certainly make things worse, right? Now, why does it feel so good to itch? Yeah, it's because your pain receptors and your itch receptors cross over a little bit. Now, they're two different paths, but they communicate a little bit. So, if you can think that that the itch receptors, right? When they activate, it's what's called a towards response. You go towards it to itch it, right? And the itch usually indicates to the brain that there's some sort of threat, yeah? Whether it be mosquitoes or other bugs or something that's on your skin, yeah? And then you itch to get rid of that. Pain receptors are what's called away response, where if you have an injury on your ankle, you're not going to keep leaning on it, are you? You're going to keep away from it. You're going to try and limp so that you get as the least amount of pressure on there as possible. You know? And your pain sensation, or your pain receptors, and your itch sensation cannot exist at the same time in that particular spot. Yeah. So that's why when you have an itch, you itch, right? Until it starts becoming painful. So the pain replaces the itch response. And now it feels fine because now you just have the pain left over. But it's not itching anymore, so you can stop itching. But the thing is, it comes back again because when the pain goes away, your itch comes back. Yeah? So it swaps over then and there. And your itch response also creates an endorphin release. God, you got those two things happening. You try and tell somebody to stop itching when they have eczema, right? That is the worst advice you can give to somebody, especially kids. You know, stop scratching, stop scratching. That's the worst advice, yeah, because that itch feels so damn good. Yeah? So there should be different ways of going around that, and sometimes it's just sort of giving it a little bit of a slap, so you're creating more of a pain response rather than an itch response, yeah, or distracting them away from it if they're kids. Now, common mistakes that people might make, taking a one-size-fits-all approach. So if you hop on Google, you might find some advice on there how to treat eczema, but is that what you particularly need? Yeah. It's usually a very generic advice, as well as it might be some stories that worked for some people. Yeah. But what we need to find out is what works for you. You know? So we're not all the same, we're all individually unique, and therefore treatments should also be individual and unique. Yeah? Also, there's using Dr. Google for diagnosis. I get this with patients sometimes. They'll just diagnose themselves and they'll come in and I've got this and I've got that, and it's like, actually you don't. So you could start with a cold and end up with a brain cancer in your head, which is not a good thing. It's dangerous and it can be very time consuming. So it's kind of like having an issue with your computer, right? And you try and fix it yourself. And I've done this myself as well. Sometimes you're not treating the cause of the problem of the computer at all, and it takes hours and hours and hours of time, and you just call up tech support and they're like, oh, you just do this. It's like, oh my god, that could have been so much easier, right? So this doesn't mean you shouldn't do research. Yeah, research is good. It's just that don't try and diagnose things. Yeah, diagnosing is for professionals to do. Unfortunately, in New Zealand, as naturopaths, we're not allowed to diagnose because we're not regulated by the government. This is something that I usually talk about in my talks. Make sure when you see a naturopath, they are qualified, okay? Because practically anybody can be a naturopath or call themselves naturopath. You can be a naturopath today. And that's dangerous. And that's what we're trying to change, but it hasn't happened yet. So make sure you look for qualified naturopaths. Relying on steroids and antibiotics, we all know that doesn't quite work because that's not really treating the problem. Yeah, it's just pretty much a band-aid for your symptoms. So when you think about it, if you've been given antibiotics, yes, it treats the infection, but think about why the infection came through in the first place. If you're getting things like antihistamines, okay, why is there an allergy in the first place? Alright, and aiming in the dark with things like intolerant foods. So foods are very important when you're treating things like eczema, yeah? Knowing what your intolerant foods are. Who's done elimination diet before? Okay, so I've got people coming into my clinic saying, yes, I've done elimination diet and it hasn't worked. Usually, 90% of the time, they're not doing it properly. They'll say, oh yeah, I've cut this out and that, and it's like, okay, did you cut it all out at the same time? It's like, oh no, I've cut it out on and off. And I say, well, did you cut it out completely? It's like, oh, it might have snuck in every now and then. It's like, okay, so you didn't quite do it properly. Yeah? With elimination diet, you have to cut out a lot of common allergenic foods like wheat, dairy, eggs, citrus fruits, peanuts, other types of nuts, and other foods that you think you're reacting to all at once for at least 3 weeks. Yeah? Because it takes 3 weeks for antibodies or immune proteins that your body produces when you have an intolerant food coming in. It takes 3 weeks for that to clear. Yeah? So you need a fresh start before you start reintroducing things in. And when you do reintroduce things in, you have to do it one at a time, and it has to be about 1 to 2 weeks each item that you reintroduce. So quite often that's not done properly because it's so grueling and time consuming, and it requires a lot of effort. Yeah, a lot of effort. Not many people have that kind of time on their hands these days. So that's why I cut corners a little bit and give you intolerance testers, yeah, so that you can get your intolerance tested, whether it be food substances or environmental substances, yeah, so that you know what you're intolerant to, and then you combine it with things like food diary, yeah, because not all intolerance tests, well, actually, none of the intolerance tests are 100% correct. There will be some errors here and there. Skin prick test, the ones that you get on your skin, yeah, about 50% is false positive. Yeah, that's a huge percentage. That's because you're trying to introduce things like eggs and dairy and things like that directly through your skin. Yeah, we usually have those things through our mouth, going through our digestive system and through our gut lumen and into our bloodstream there. So doing it straight onto the skin is not an accurate process, because that's not how we introduce it into our body. Hopping from treatment to treatment, this is a very common one as well. I say, some people come in and they just do one treatment for a month and then they think it's not working and then they move on to the other. You have to be patient. You have to be patient, especially when you're an adult. It took you this long to get here. It's not going to be a one-night fix, right? So, especially with the things that we're exposed to these days, as adults, things like alcohol, caffeine, stresses, all of those things, whereas kids, not so much. So that's why they tend to heal much quicker. I usually see results by about 3 months mark for kids, if we nail it on the spot. It's because they also regenerate the skin much faster as well. For adults, I'd look at 6 months plus for eczema. Some people do much. They get better much quicker, and maybe it was just one type of food that they just needed to eliminate. Yeah. But quite often, if it's chronic and systemic eczema, it'll take a bit of time. And the medical approach, again, I won't spend too much here. I will say though that I don't like talking down about medical system. I don't think that's the way forward. It's because we all have a place. as practitioners. We wouldn't be here without the current medical system, yeah, and I mean that in a good way and a bad way as well, yeah. So if you have a car crash, you don't want to come and see me, right? You're not gonna go, oh Kohei, I just had a car crash, I'm bleeding to death through my leg, this gaping wound in my leg. What should I do? Okay, well, let's see, I can fit you in on Thursday, and maybe we can rub some herbs on there and see what happens. No, you want to go to the hospital right away, get that wound checked up, make sure it's sealed so that it's not bleeding all the time, and make sure the infections and things like that are dealt with. Yeah. So we all have a place. So what we need to do as practitioners is stop our egos, really, thinking about ourselves, because it's about you guys, it's about the patient, and if we work together, we can produce a much better result for every one of you. So that's just my little spiel about that, because I'm quite passionate about that too. Right, so things like antihistamines, so that will be things like loratadine, cetirizine, fexofenadine, all of those things. Yes, sometimes it's necessary if the itch is really, really intense and you can't get rid of it except by having these antihistamines. Okay, great, let's have that continue, but we'll work on other things, and then eventually we can wean off it, right? That's how I usually work. I don't take them off if they feel like they really need it. But chronic use can produce quite a bit of side effects to your body. Yeah. In fact, the U.S. National Library of Medicine has quoted the antihistamines most commonly linked to liver injury has been, I'm not going to pretend that I know how to say those names, but one of them is cetirizine. Yeah. Z-Top, are you guys familiar with Z-Top from the pharmacy? Yeah, that's cetirizine. Yeah. And that's still on the market. This one has been taken off the market, yeah, but it's doing the same thing. It can really put some stress onto your liver, so you do have to be careful with that. There's also steroids, of course, steroid creams. Some of the things that you might know is thinning of your skin. Usually that's not very common if you're using really low percentage steroid creams like hydrocortisone, but if you're using things like Locoid or Dermal, which is much stronger ones for a long time, then it can certainly affect your skin. Yeah? It can, and your steroids that you might rub onto your skin is very good at absorbing things into your body. Yeah? So it can start to affect your adrenal glands, yeah, which affects your stress responses. It can also slow down the growth of children as well. And also it can do some damage to your bones as well. Prednisone is another one for oral steroids, and that is quite a strong medication. And I've seen this literally in my clinic. One guy came in and he had some of the common side effects are difficulty sleeping, headaches, fatigue, muscle weakness, irritability, anxiety, bad dreams, gastric bleeding. He had pretty much all of those things, and it was a prednisone reaction. So that's another one that you really want to be careful with if you're taking this. And antibiotics. And we talked a little bit about how that can cause gut dysbiosis, which is the imbalance of your bacterial flora, which leads into things like leaky gut syndrome, and which can lead on to liver stress as well. So just want to give you an overall view of how we work as naturopaths. Think of a tree, and all the leaves are the symptoms. Yeah. And what medical system is really good at doing is chopping those leaves off, yeah, so that you reduce the symptoms coming off. What we do as naturopaths is look at what's going on at the branches and the trunk of the tree, yeah, and even further down into the roots, which would represent your gut because it's taking up the nutrients from the soil. Soil is also very important as well. It's your environment. Yeah, we talked about that. So what kind of nutrients are in the soil? Is there pollution? That also expands out to even further out. Is there some type of industrial plant nearby? Yeah. Is there some type of pollution going on nearby? All of those things affect you as a person. Yeah. So when you come and see me, we look at all of that. It's not just about that eczema on the skin. It's about, okay, what's going inside your gut. Okay, what's happening around you, with your work, with your lifestyle, with everything else that makes you you. Yeah. So that's just a little spiel about that. So starting off with the branches and the leaves, the things that we can do topically, things like natural creams. Now when people come and see me, I usually create a cream specifically for them. Yeah. So I might put some of these herbs in there, mixed in with what's called herbal-based cream, which has no nasties in there, and it's a water-based cream, so it lets your skin breathe. Licorice is great. It's great for anti-inflammatory, but also soothing for your skin and healing your skin. Yeah, healing your wounds. Calendula and kawa. Kawa is a brilliant native herb. Yeah, and we have a lot of great native herbs, by the way. Because of the nature of New Zealand environment, which is very damp, it grows a lot of fungus and bacteria and things like that. And so a lot of our herbs have antibacterial, antifungal, those kind of properties in there. So those two work very well as an antimicrobial. Chickweed is something that really helps to take the itch away. Yeah, it's slightly cooling as well, so it's really nice to put onto your skin. And aloe vera, again, is also something that is very soothing for the skin and skin repair. Now, there's also things like probiotic creams. Sometimes in the past I've recommended patients to just pop open a probiotic into the cream and just mix it in and rub it onto the skin, because we mentioned people with eczema tend to have dysfunction in the bacterial balance in their skin. Yeah, so by adding some of those probiotics onto the cream, it helps to rebalance that.
So you talk about all the probiotics that you take internally normally?
You can. Now this gets really interesting. Now I'll talk about this particular strain of probiotic first. This one has had some really good research coming through, and it tends to fight things like Staphylococcus bacteria. Yeah, which is something that you have quite abundant on your skin, and especially for eczema patients, they tend to have larger amounts because we have difficulty fighting against those Staphylococcus bacteria. So this one is quite good. However, it's not available in New Zealand. You can get it. I don't think it's available from New Zealand. I found it very difficult to find if there is, but it's definitely available from Australia. And from the UK as well, and you can always ship that in. Very good products, including this type of probiotic. But recently I saw a research, an article on some of the things that they're working on, these scientists who assess the probiotic or the bacterial balance on your skin and your whole body, and they formulate a specific probiotic cream for you, the ones that you are lacking. So I thought that was really cool. And it's amazing what science can do these days. So I'll be looking forward to the day that becomes something that's accessible for practitioners like me. And I can get those people tested for certain probiotics that might be missing and put it into a cream for them. Epsom salt baths. Not sure if you guys heard of this, but Epsom salt is something that you can grab from the supermarkets or here, preferably. And I would use about 250 grams of this Epsom salt. Now, Epsom salt helps to draw out some of the toxins that are in your skin. Okay, and you want a decent amount in the bath. Yeah, to do that, I would soak no longer than 20 minutes. In Epsom salt bath, because there is a little bit of risk of what's called backflow. So your skin can start reabsorbing some of the things that you just excreted. So you want to aim for about 15-20 minutes with the Epsom salt baths. make sure you wash off afterwards, because if you don't wash off properly, it can the Epsom salts can last on your skin, and that can be a little bit irritating. And moisturize after that, because it can be a little bit drying as well. Okay. Now you do need to tinker a little bit in terms of how much you want to put in, especially for kids. You want lower doses, and also how bad the eczema is. If there's a lot of open wounds, that can sting a little bit as well. So you need to change the amount that you want to put into your bath. Okay. You can also put things like baking soda in there. Particularly if you have with a fungal issue, baking soda can act as an antifungal and also moisturizing. Avoiding skin irritants is very important. All the things that you might be familiar with and not familiar with, parabens, sodium lauryl sulfate, this is quite a common one, and a lot of products are starting to take that out of their formulation, which is good to see. Modulating the immune system. Can anybody tell me what's missing from this immune system here? So we have the tonsils, the lymphatic vessels, the lymph nodes, the thymus gland, spleen, appendix, lymphatic vessels, bone marrow.
Adenoids? Adenoids?
Yeah, yeah. Liver, okay. Now we talked about these two particular ones. There's two missing. And we talked about this throughout the night. What's your biggest defense that you've got? Skin. I just couldn't believe that they left it out. You know, as I was looking through Google Images and I was like looking at this, I'm like, are they serious? Skin is one of your biggest immune systems ever. And the other one is your gut, isn't it? Yeah, that's another main one. It's because you're exposed to a lot of external things into your gut, so you need a really good immune system in there. And up to about 70% of your immune cells are in your gut. Yeah? So very odd that they left that out. Anyway, things like vitamin C, great product for things like eczema, because it works on so many different levels. So it works on your immune system, right? So it helps to enhance your immune system, but it also helps to technically modulate it as well. Yeah. And when I say modulate, it's something that helps to reduce histamine release. Yeah. So that's a really good way to reduce down the itch. But it also works on your collagen, yeah? Collagen production, so it helps with your skin cells overall. Anti-allergy herbs like nettle, albizia, perilla. You might not be familiar with some of these herbs, but some of the formulations we use in some of our products that we have helps to just settle down that histamine release and bring down the fire that's in your immune system, yeah, because it's overactive. Blood cleansers, very important. Burdock, gotukola, dandelion, which helps with your kidney, so it flushes things out of your body, and cleavers. All of those things helps the lymphatic system and your drainage system, so that you pull the toxins out of your body. And of course, probiotics. You need that in there to support your gut function, which is a big part of your immune system. The gut and the liver. Probiotics, specifically things like LGG, which you might potentially have heard of. That's a good strain. There's a lot of different strains that you can have, and that's a good one for eczema, particularly for mothers, pregnant mothers to have, because it significantly reduces the likelihood of kids developing eczema if you have LGG. Prebiotics. Ooh, yeah. A lot of people are like, what? I've heard of probiotics, but what the heck is prebiotics? These are basically fibers. Yeah. So fibers that you get from things like nuts and seeds, fruits and vegetables. Yeah. Particularly in the skin of fruits and vegetables. It's things that don't particularly get digested, but it flows through your gut, and it helps to grow your probiotics. Yeah. So having this combination is really important to support your gut. Add the glutamine in there, and you've got a nice, really supportive gut treatment there, because the glutamine goes in there and helps to seal those tiny little holes that I told you about that those negative bacteria make into your gut lining, which causes the leaky gut. Yeah. So glutamine goes in there, plugs those holes, reseals the gut nicely. Same as aloe vera, great anti-inflammatory, same as turmeric as well. These two work great together as an anti-inflammatory for the gut and for the whole body system. Aloe vera works on your immune system as well, and coats the mucus lining really well. Yeah, just the finishing touch to your gut support. Yeah? And turmeric also helps with your liver function, yeah? With your detoxification pathway. And other liver herbs like milk thistle, globe artichoke, and rosemary all help the detoxification pathway of your liver. Yeah? And antioxidants also. You need to protect your cells from oxidative damage, and a lot of your antioxidants are held in your liver. So if the liver is not functioning very well, then it might not utilize those antioxidants very well, so you need to replenish that properly. Right, and we do things like food and environmental intolerance testings. What we do is we take a hair sample, we send it away to a lab in Hamilton, and they test for about 150, 200 or so different substances, environmental foods, as well as how they can also check on things like parasitic infection, candida overgrowth, how your organs are functioning, etc. It's quite a comprehensive test. There's a few other ones that we do as well, like IgG and IgA testing, which is more medical. That I would say that might be slightly more accurate, but they don't test for as many things. Whereas the hair testing, they test for a lot, and also you can add to it. If you feel like you're reacting to something, we can send a sample down to the lab and they'll test it for $1 plus GST per item. Yeah, so really cheap. Yeah, it's a nice service that they have because they'll keep your hair sample for a year. Yeah. And that way you're not aiming in the dark in terms of what you need to cut out. Yeah. So know what you're intolerant to. That's very important. And because that's what's feeding into the roots. Yeah, the roots of your tree, which is your gut. And the environment. So we've got things like dust mites, pollens, that's black mold. All over that wall. Yeah. You can treat some of these things yourself. Things like dust mites. Yeah. You can kill them at around 60 degrees Celsius. Yeah. And that's a key number. You need to be around that area. So a hot wash in the washing machine doesn't quite do the job. Leaving it out in the sun doesn't quite do the job. Yeah. What you can do is before you wash, you can soak it in hot water. Yeah, that'll kill the dust mites right away. Okay.
Like boiled water or what?
Yeah, like I'm not sure how well the linen will actually hold up if it's boiling water, but if you can just have it above 60 degrees Celsius, you'll be sure that you'll get rid of dust mites in your bed sheets. After that, wash the sheets, and then you can also tumble dry, yeah, because you've killed the dust mites, but it's not the dust mites that's really the problem, it's their feces and the debris that you need to get rid of. That's what you're usually reacting to. So to get rid of that, the tumble dry is quite good, but also vacuuming, yeah. And vacuum, and I specifically say this, have HEPA filters in here. Yeah. HEPA filter, what that does is, if you don't have HEPA filter and you're vacuuming every day, thinking you're getting rid of all these dust mite debris and things like that, it just goes straight out the other side, yeah, and back into the air, right in the air. So having the HEPA filter stops that from happening.
So how long do you soak the sheets and things in boiling water?
You don't have to do it for long. If it's 60 degrees or higher, they die pretty much instantly.
Oh really?
Yeah, so I'd just give it a couple of minutes or 5 minutes. That should be more than enough. And you can add things like tea tree oil or eucalyptus in there as well. They also help with the killing of dust mites. Now with mattresses though, now that's not something that you can dunk into hot water. So I would get some professional steam cleaning done. You can kill molds with things like vinegar and tea tree oil. But sometimes you just need some stronger stuff to kill them off. Yeah. So for me, if there's any sort of mold issues in the bathroom, what I do is every now and then I'll use things like Eczema just to give it a really good clean, and then most of the time I just use natural products to keep it clean. Yeah. Make sure to use dehumidifiers in your home if you're reacting to these things, because New Zealand is such a humid place, or very there's a lot of moisture, right? And that dust mites also love the humidity, so that's why dust mites are so prevalent in New Zealand. Same as molds, yeah. So the condensation and moisture buildup causes all of those things to come through. So have the dehumidifier in there, and you can also get dehumidifiers that also have HEPA filters as well. Right, and yeah, if you're having issues with molds and things like that, you got to get the mold sorted in your environment, but you also need antifungal treatment if you got candida issues coming through. So antifungal, horopito is a native herb that works brilliantly as an antifungal, but also make sure that you have things like probiotics and prebiotics going in at the same time, because when candida, when you're trying to treat candida, they die and they release toxins. That's what we call die-off effect. Now, some people that we treat candida with, they'll have this die-off effect where they feel really crap for, well, however long it might be, before they get better. Now, I try and reduce that as much as possible, because it's not very ideal for my patients to feel that way as they're going through their treatment. So I put in the probiotics, I put in the prebiotics, which draws things out of your body much more effectively, and also I introduce the antifungals slowly. I don't go gung-ho right away, because that's more likely to cause die-off effect. Pollens, that's a bit hard. We're surrounded by it, but what we can do is put in some nice anti-allergy herbs, work on your immune system, use things like vitamin C, and just little habits, like when you walk in to your home after work or something, take your clothes off, have a shower, put the clothes into the washing, and change, because when you're in those clothes and then you go to your bedroom, you lie on your bed, you go to the sofa, you're basically just spreading the pollen everywhere. You know? So it's little things like that that you can take care of to reduce your exposure. And last little bit is relaxation. I'd like to be there right now. And if I can prescribe a 3 months holiday to Fiji to all of my patients, I would. But I can't. I don't have that kind of money. So what we work with is herbs and nutrients, and also relaxation techniques. So adaptogenic herbs, these are herbs that helps to increase your tolerance to stress, yeah, reduces things like anxiety. At the same time, it brings up your mood and your energy levels. Great way to deal with stresses, and it's really working from the inside, and quite often it's working from your adrenals as well. Magnesium is very important to relax your body. Yeah, a lot of people are deficient in magnesium these days. Your muscle fibers overlap like this, and each time they contract and release, that release is caused by the magnesium attaching onto tiny little centipede legs that pulls your muscle fibers in. Now, when you're stressed, you're doing this all the time, right? Because you're tensing, your blood flow is going all to your peripherals, yeah? That uses up your magnesium very fast. Also, the sources of magnesium from our food is quite often lacking, yeah? Because of some of the foods, the type of foods we eat, but also the nutrients in our foods, even some of the vegetables from supermarkets, they lack a lot of nutrients. Over the last 30-40 years, we've lost about 25 to 30% of our nutrients.
How much?
25 to 30%. That's a huge amount. That's huge. And our foods has changed so much. You know, carrots used to look like purple or white. You know, apples used to be bitter, you know, not sweet. All of these things have changed because all the nutrients have started to disappear, and the agricultural system is pointing towards what people like to have, which is something sweet, you know. So that and New Zealand soil tends to be low in minerals like magnesium, zinc, selenium, iodine. So those kind of things is working against us. So replenishing the magnesium is really important, and that's why the Epsom salt is so good, because it's magnesium sulfate. Yeah? It goes straight into your muscles and helps to relax your whole body as well. B vitamins, great for increasing your energy levels, reducing your stresses as well. Breathing exercises, so some things that I'll teach you through your plan, because my plan includes dietary changes, nutritional changes, and lifestyle changes as well. So within the lifestyle adjustments, I talk about these things. General stress and sleep management is very important, yeah, and those are some of the things that I also talk about in the treatment plan as well. Here are just some examples. We came in, when he walked in, he was bleeding from his face. It was that severe, and it was all around his whole body as well. And it was a bit of a classic allergy response, but with more so in the gut, yeah. And so after 3 months, that's him there, and it's all cleared from his body as well. So the parents were happy campers. So was this wee fella as well. He was more of a very strong allergy response. You can see that although his face isn't bleeding, it's very inflamed. Yeah, very, very inflamed. And his eyes were almost shut. Yeah. This was about 4 months later, 4 or 5 months later. He was all cleared, and the mother couldn't be any happier, because it was just something that was just driving her crazy, driving him crazy too. This wee fella here, he's a Japanese kid, and he came over here a few years ago and started developing eczema. Now you can see the presentation is a little bit different. You can see a lot of different spots coming through, yeah, rather than patches. Yeah. That for me is a classic sign of things like candida overgrowth. Yeah. And so we started doing some candida treatment, started to get better, but I didn't see the improvements that I wanted to see, or as quickly as I thought I would. So we started ask the question, okay, what's going on there? And it was particularly around his legs. His face was looking much better, torso, arms looking much better. So we figured that when he went to Japan, his eczema cleared, and that was only for about 3-week period. Yeah, and then when he came back, surely the eczema came back. So I thought, something in the environment, right? So because it was more of a candida picture, I said, okay, what's your home environment like? What's the mold growth like? And they were like, oh, I don't think it's bad. But I got them to check, and surely enough, there was a lot of mold on the walls, on the ceiling, on the windowsills, and particularly in the carpet where he used to play a lot. And his feet are the main exposure. So we're like, okay, that's where it's coming from. So they decided to move house rather than trying to clean everything up. And they moved, and there it is. Much, much, much clearer. Yeah. So you can see how the environment can have very, very strong influences on your skin. And this lady, I actually look like this. These yellow pus that comes out. Yeah. I had that quite a bit on my skin as well. And for her, it was mainly the gut and the stress that was affecting her. So she worked on her stress, and she started taking some probiotics, which wasn't under my prescription, but it started to work nicely. And it was the particular probiotic that she was missing. And once that was into her system, looking much better. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming out to listen to me blab on about something that I'm passionate about. But I hope you guys got something out of it.
That was awesome.
Thank you. But yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.